This week on Jerusalem Dateline, could ISIS use the southern border of the U.S. to launch a mega terror attack on American soil? Plus, a look back at the impact of Israel's pullout from the Gaza Strip 10 years ago. And prophecy in action. North American Jews come back to the land of Israel. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. For critics who thought the Iranian nuclear deal was bad, it just got a whole lot worse. Turns out that Iran will get to inspect one of its most controversial military sites on its own. And as Dale Hurd reports, the new revelation has many up in arms.
It has been learned that Iran will be allowed to use its own inspectors to investigate a site it has been accused of using to develop nuclear arms. Under a secret agreement with a UN agency that would normally do the inspections, an Iranian-picked inspection team would investigate the Parchin nuclear site, which has been linked to persistent allegations of secret nuclear weapons work. The State Department defended the plan.
We're confident in the agency's technical plans for investigating the possible military dimensions of Iran's former program, issues that in some cases date back more than a decade. Just as importantly, the IAEA is comfortable with arrangements.
But House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Ed Royce said international inspection should be done by international inspectors, period. President Obama has said the deal with Iran is the strongest arms agreement ever negotiated, and that the strength of the accord is that it does not rely on trust of the Iranians, but on rigorous inspections. But critics of the deal are not likely to trust Iranian-picked inspectors. In Israel, Republican presidential candidate Mike Huckabee said the deal represents a clear and present danger to Israel and the United States.
The Iranians have made it very clear for 36 years that their intention is not only to wipe Israel off the face of the map, their words, but also to bring death to America.
And this new revelation can only increase opposition to the deal with Iran. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, many people feel that the Iranian nuclear deal is a bad deal. And 10 years ago, many warned that the so-called disengagement was a bad deal. That's when 9,000 Jewish Israelis were evicted from the Gaza Strip and 4 West Bank communities. The deal was supposed to lead to peace, but instead led to war with the terror group Hamas and others. John Jessup has that story.
Moshav Nativ HaAsarah sits on the front lines of the Israeli-Hamas conflict. CBN's Scott Ross recently visited there and toured the community with resident Hila Fenlon.
You know, you're in a center of a village that looks, in first look, normal village. And when you look over there, for example, you can see there's a bomb shelter.
That's a bomb shelter?
That's a bomb shelter. And this room over here,
yes,
that is a bomb shelter. But in the last 14 years, when our kids are waiting for the school bus, they're waiting here on the doorstep of a bomb shelter, because if the alarm starts, they have less than 3 or 4 seconds to find shelter. So if you have less than
3 or 4 seconds?
Seconds, if we're lucky.
Nativ HaAsarah is the closest Israeli community to the Gaza border.
Since the disengagement, it's put the whole village into the range of mortars. Now, mortars are official weapon made in Iran, made in Russia. We know it because we see the serial number and it says made in Iran.
Have many people been killed?
We had 3 people that lost their lives. But the real story of the mortars and the rockets is not how many people are being killed. It's what happens to you. They are not trying to kill us. They're trying to break our spirit.
In 2005, then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon unilaterally moved 21 Israeli communities from the Gaza Strip. 3 villages facing Nativ HaAsarah soon became launch pads for sending rockets into Israel. Now they're Hamas outposts and training grounds. The Israeli government at the time argued that the one-sided withdrawal would reduce friction with the Palestinians and pave the way to peace. Instead, Hamas won legislative elections in 2006 and eventually seized control of Gaza. Since then, rockets have rained down on Israel, leading to war with Hamas.
You're a mother, you have children. Wouldn't you want to live somewhere away from this threat in safety?
First of all, of course I do, but you don't leave home for war. If I leave, they won, and I don't have the privilege to lose this war.
And if rockets weren't bad enough, Last summer's war revealed a frightening new scenario: tunnels.
Is this Gaza over here?
There's a road that goes all the way along over there. So this is the actual border between Israel and Gaza. This is Gaza City, this is Israel.
Where was the tunnel?
The tunnel was just over there, just behind us, closer to the houses. It was a mile long, half a mile into the Palestinian side and half a mile into the Israeli side.
A mile?
A mile long.
And you could drive through it?
A car can go through, yeah, with electricity, with ventilation. It's meant to serve a very, very big operation.
How do you know they're not building new tunnels?
We know the building, we don't know where.
Do you have much of a military presence here? Israeli soldiers?
Israel always said they use other means than actual presence. I do feel sometimes abandoned on the border, that's true.
What is that?
This is shooting. Someone is shooting at someone. Probably Hamas practicing somewhere, or I don't know. You see, there's some military. I think maybe we might want to go away, actually.
Really?
Yes.
At the border, there are two walls, one to stop sniper fire, the other to stop attackers from entering the community.
And this is where Hamas is practicing for the next war right now, as we speak. They are just behind this wall.
People pray all over the world for the peace of Israel, or the peace in this land would come, that people's wishes are here. Yeah.
So that's something I appreciate a lot, and I hope it will help as well.
Security wasn't the only sacrifice about the disengagement. Thousands of successful, prosperous Israelis found themselves uprooted and forced to start over. CBN's Scott Ross discovered the human cost and what happened to some of those faithful pioneers.
Here, this is the main town of Gush Katif, Neve Dekalim, and the buildings that you see here are still standing from what we know last. At the beginning, they were a university for women Palestinian terrorists.
What a story. Like a bad movie.
For decades, Anita Tucker successfully farmed in her community of Nazir Hazani. She helped build the Jewish enclave of Gush Katif from the sand dunes of Gaza. Tucker told CBN's Scott Ross about one of her first encounters that still seems hard to believe.
One day we see, like out of no place comes, like out from under the sand dune comes this Arab with his kafiyah and his long galabiyah, his long Arab robe. And there comes out this other Arab, a little bit intimidating, and all of a sudden we see they have bread and salt in their hands in the Muslim tradition. Bruchim habayim, welcome, they say to us. We're so glad that you're here.
And these are Arabs.
Arabs, and they say, we're so happy that you're here. Maybe there'll be some work for our people.
The communities began to thrive, and over 30 years, agriculture grew to a $60 million per year industry, providing 15% of Israel's exported vegetables.
Were your Arab neighbors surprised by your success, that you had brought something of a blessing out of a curse?
They were happy with that blessing because there was work for their people. We taught them modern agriculture.
So you had Arab neighbors and you got along with each other. There was no conflict, nothing. No. Where did it break down?
When the world started talking about peace, because I always say they misspelled it, and instead of writing P-E-A-C-E, somebody by mistake wrote P-I-E-C-E, and they started tearing us to pieces and tearing the Arabs living in Gaza to pieces. I think the real trouble started when they brought Yasser Arafat to the Gaza Strip.
As time went by and talk of the so-called disengagement grew, Tucker, then known as the Celery Lady, talked to CBN News in 2005 about the prospect of being forced from her home.
It can't be that people who are living peacefully in a place and it turned into a flourishing, beautiful area should have to leave their home. And around us there are people who are trying to murder us, throwing rockets at us, trying to kill us.
The 9,000 residents of Gush Katif decided not to voluntarily leave. They felt they had settled biblical land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob with the blessing of the Israeli government. After more than 30 years of successful building and farming on the Gaza sand dunes, it took just a week to obliterate Jewish life there.
This is the caravan. There were 250 for originally 1,800 families that were in Gush Katif.
How far are you from the border here?
We're about 25 kilometers from the border.
So is there any danger for you here?
First of all, you have to understand this temporary site, everything is cardboard paper. Nothing is like really protected area. The only protected areas that we have are these sewer pipes. But it means that when the siren goes off, all the families have to run outside, even if it's in the middle of the night.
So you don't have bomb shelters?
We don't have bomb shelters.
Why do you choose to stay here?
It's because maybe they don't have the finances in order to build, and they're quite stuck until the government finds some kind of solution for them.
Lorenz Baziz and her husband were also farmers. Now she works in the visitor center that tells the history of Gush Katif.
Aside from dealing with the hardships of the people and the rebuilding of the communities, we felt that we have a story to tell. It's a whole huge story of pioneering the land of Israel. Although there are a lot of hardships, there are also communities that are flourishing.
The community of Nizar Hazani is one that stuck together. Some families built this new community, kept the old name, and moved in 3 years ago.
All the time, from the minute that we left, we switched mode and said, we are building again, we're staying together as a community.
Do you know what's happened to your own land there?
We know the soldiers who were there. Our town is back to being the sand dunes that were.
Would you have any desire to go back to Gaza?
I'll be the first in line. As soon as it's safe to go there and the government says come back, I'll be the first in line.
Coming up, a new book spells out a chilling scenario of how ISIS could collaborate with Mexican drug cartels to launch a mega terror attack against the U.S. Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. Nearly 10 years after Israel pulled out of the Gaza Strip, Hamas dug tunnels inside Israel during the 2014 summer war with Israel. Their goal? To kill, kidnap, and terrorize Israelis. It was a development many warned about in 2005. Now in 2015, a new thriller warns that same tactic could be used by ISIS to strike America. During the war, Hamas terrorists used an intricate series of tunnels to carry out sneak attacks. While IDF soldiers stopped those attacks, the tunnels shocked Israelis. Israel destroyed many of the tunnels, but the frightening memory remains. Dan Gordon, a veteran of 6 Israeli wars, talked about their effectiveness.
And I can't imagine anything more terrifying for the people who live there than the thought that suddenly the earth opens up, almost like a scene out of a grade B zombie movie, and the walking dead come out, except they're not dead. I've been a soldier now for 40 years, which is a long time. And the most terrifying thing that I've ever seen was the advent of the terrorist tunnel attacks that happened last summer.
Now, a year later, Gordon, an Israeli-American, has written Day of the Dead, a thriller about those tunnels. He says it should be a wake-up call to the U.S.
The country that's most vulnerable to that attack is my other homeland, the United States of America. And far more vulnerable because there are terrorist attack tunnels that exist already. They're called drug smuggling tunnels, and they run from parts of Mexico into California to Arizona and to Texas.
A former FBI agent warned recently that those tunnels could be used as an underground highway for ISIS. Gordon says the drug tunnels could make an unholy alliance between ISIS and the Mexican drug cartels.
They don't have to dig them, they just have to rent them. They have billions of dollars. That's a language that all the cartels understand.
Gordon says ISIS studied Hamas last summer.
They watched what Hamas did. They saw why it failed. They know how it can succeed. And what people don't realize is the Middle East, for ISIS, is their R&D lab. It's their Silicon Valley for what they intend to do to the United States.
He says southern border cities and towns like San Diego are vulnerable.
The reason the United States is so vulnerable to that, we don't have the surveillance over that border that Israel does. We don't have our most elite military units on constant patrol on the American-Mexican border. We have, if you want to talk about juicy targets for ISIS in San Diego, half the Pacific Fleet is at anchor in San Diego.
As an author, Gordon also wrote to entertain. One reviewer said Gordon gets into the mind of a terrorist like no one since Tom Clancy. But Gordon says it has things Clancy never included in his thrillers.
It's a big Tom Clancy, wonderful international espionage, great read. It's the first book that I know of that has a born-again Christian female graduate of Liberty University, female James Bond. At the heart of that book, the other thing is faith. At the heart of that book is something that you and I have both experienced together, which is you may think that you're in control, but the one who's in control at all times is the Almighty.
Gordon refutes the notion he's giving ideas to ISIS. He points out they've already got the blueprints. He says the U.S. needs to wake up to this clear and present danger.
I guarantee you there are people from ISIS right now who are examining U.S. cities. And like any military, there are numbers of hot young commanders who are saying, I have a great idea, and they're presenting their plans to the general staff of ISIS. One of those plans is going to get accepted, and one of those plans is going to get implemented. And if I am looking at what's the most logical plan, it's in that book, Day of the Dead.
Up next, Governor Mike Huckabee sits down with CBN's Julie Stahl to talk about the Iranian nuclear deal and how he would change U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East if he becomes president. Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. Presidential candidate and former Governor Mike Huckabee sat down with CBN's Julie Stahl. They discussed the Iranian nuclear deal and how he would change U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East as president.
Governor Huckabee, welcome to Jerusalem Dateline.
Thank you. Great to be back in Israel.
So why did you come to Israel at this time?
Well, we did a fundraising event for the campaign. As you know, there are lots of American citizens here who still vote in America and can legally give to American candidates. And, through the years, I've made a lot of friends here and built a lot of relationships. And so we came for that and also to meet with a number of the government officials.
What would be the cornerstone of your Middle East policy?
It would be that America would exhibit an extraordinary level of strength and camaraderie and I think a clear relationship with the people of the Middle East who wanted peace, who wanted democracy for its people, wanted freedom, which means that Israel would be at the top of that list.
What would you do to restore America's position in the Middle East?
The most important thing we do is keep our word. A country, it doesn't matter how strong it is militarily, if it loses its credibility because it doesn't honor its commitments and keep its word, if it can't be trusted, then whatever economic and military power it has is essentially erased by its lack of integrity. So first and foremost, America needs to be a country that means what it says and says what it means.
What do you think is the worst part about the Iranian deal?
Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. This president has written this deal with trust but vilify. Trust the Iranians, who have never kept a deal in 36 years of their regime, and then vilify every opponent who looks at this and says, Mr. President, this is not a good deal. And it makes the world a much less safe place to be.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Congress is going to be able to override the president on this one?
Gosh, I hope so. I think it's significant that you've had Democrat senators of prominence like Chuck Schumer and Robert Menendez who have openly said they will oppose it. But there needs to be a greater and broader voice of Democrats who put their country and, frankly, the peace of the world above just supporting their president and their party. This is a matter of the future of America's security and Israel's security, and frankly, that of the whole world.
And what's your hope for America?
My hope for America is that we find not only economic and military strength, but we find moral strength. I don't think we'll exist as a country in 100 years if we don't return back to the roots of righteousness. We have to be a nation that practices what our founders put in place in the Constitution as well as the Declaration of Independence. The exact words in the Declaration were that we would adhere to the laws of nature and the laws of nature's God. Those are pretty fundamental. And we have to be a nation that has that sense of awe and wonder of our responsibility as frail human beings to a God whose law is above any law we can ever create.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us.
Coming up, prophecy in action. See how some North American Jews are taking the step of returning to their biblical homeland. Welcome back. Cultural differences and leaving family behind can make immigrating to Israel difficult. But more and more Jewish North Americans are making Israel their permanent home. CBN correspondent Julie Stahl has that story.
Seeing Jewish people return to Israel is like watching Bible prophecy unfold before your eyes. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel all speak of the Jewish return to the land.
It's an exciting day. 232 new immigrants arrived in Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion Airport from North America to make Israel their home.
Jewish Agency Chairman Natan Sharansky and government officials welcomed the group.
Only think for a moment, each of you, about your fathers, your grandfathers, your great-grandfathers, all those generations of your families of Jews who were dreaming and praying next year in Jerusalem. And you did it.
19-year-old Max Kresh came from Detroit. He's one of 59 newcomers joining the Israel Defense Forces as a lone soldier or one without any family here.
I came to yeshiva last year. I studied in yeshiva. And being in Israel, learning in Israel, and living in Israel influenced me, and it made me realize how much I really love being here.
Almost 30 families with 75 children make up this group of new immigrants. They include Lisa and David Parshan, along with 2 children.
It was really nice to watch people just like us coming off. They're all jet lagged, but with a smile on their face. It was a really very exciting experience.
Their older daughter, Shira, paved the way 2 years ago.
You know, Mashiach is coming, and I know that Israel is the place to be, and I made Aliyah when I was 17 years old.
This group arrived on an El Al flight chartered by Nefesh B'Nefesh. The organization partners with the government to help North American and British Jews make Aliyah and adjust to life here.
I just think that every Jew should be struggling with the issue of the Jewish homeland, and that's not just a slogan, but it's rather an opportunity.
Since 2002, the group has brought about 45,000 immigrants from the U.S., Canada, and England. Co-founder Rabbi Yehoshua Fass explained why they come.
You don't want the immigration from America to be an aliyah of a wave of necessity, of running away from something, of distress, duress, persecution. You don't want that. The beauty of North American immigration is that people are choosing.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Ben Gurion Airport, Tel Aviv.
The process of Aliyah began in earnest in the late 1800s, and it's amazing to see prophecy continue to unfold. Well, that's it for this edition. Follow us throughout the week on Facebook or Twitter. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.